The night was quiet in Los Angeles, but inside Keanu Reeves the silence was heavy. He sat alone in his dimly lit living room, the city lights blinking through the large glass windows. Most people saw him as a movie star, someone who had achieved fame, wealth, and recognition. But behind the calm face, he carried memories that never faded. The deepest of these memories was of Jennifer Syme, the woman he once loved and lost. He often told himself he had learned to live with pain, but every time the world slowed down, when cameras stopped flashing and the crowds went home, her presence returned. It was not only sadness, it was something deeper. It was a reminder of how fragile life could be, how quickly joy could turn into grief. Keanu remembered the first time he saw Jennifer. She was young, full of energy, and her laughter could fill an entire room. She was not interested in his fame or his movies. She looked at him as a person, not as a star. That was what made her different. For once in his life, he felt seen, not for his roles, but for who he truly was. Their relationship was not easy. Fame had always followed him like a shadow, and it often came between them. But still, they found moments that felt untouched by the world. Quiet walks, shared music, long conversations about life and dreams. Those were the moments he remembered most. They were not about red carpets or flashing lights. They were about connection, the simple truth of two people finding comfort in each other. Then came tragedy. Their child, who was supposed to bring them new joy, never opened her eyes to the world. The pain of losing their baby broke something between them. The world around them moved fast, but for Keanu and Jennifer, time stood still. They tried to heal, but grief is a storm that does not listen to reason. Keanu never blamed her, and she never blamed him. But love that is heavy with grief often struggles to survive. They went separate ways, yet even distance could not erase the bond they shared. Years later, when he heard the news of Jennifer's accident, his heart broke again. She was gone, and with her went the chance of rebuilding what once was. He stood at her funeral, silent, his eyes filled with pain that words could not carry. The cameras captured a man dressed in black, but they could never capture the weight of what he felt inside. Since then, many people have asked him about love, about relationships, about his life. He always smiled gently, spoke with kindness, but never revealed the depth of his wounds. Humility had always been his shield. Respect for her memory was his quiet vow. But when he was alone, he let the silence speak. He remembered her smile, her warmth, the sound of her laughter. Sometimes he even whispered her name into the night as if she was listening somewhere. This memory did not weaken him. It shaped him. It gave him a deep sense of empathy for others. He knew pain, so he offered kindness. He knew loneliness, so he respected connection. Fans who met him often said he felt different, like he truly cared. They did not know that behind his kindness was a heart that had once been broken. And yet, through it all, he chose resilience. He continued to work, to create, to live, because he knew life had to be honored, even when it hurt. And in honoring life, he honored Jennifer too. The world may forget, but he never would. Her memory was not only in the past, it lived in the way he treated others, in the respect he showed, in the humility that defined him. Keanu Reeves never forgot Jennifer Syme, and in every quiet act of kindness, her spirit lived forever. The days after Jennifer's passing were some of the hardest in Keanu's life. He would wake up each morning and for a split second forget the truth. For that one fragile moment, he believed she was still alive. But then reality would return like a cold wave, and he felt the weight of absence settle in again. Every place in Los Angeles carried memories. A restaurant they once visited, a street they once walked, a song they once played together. Even the silence in his home felt like it echoed her name. Many people expected him to bury his pain under fame. They thought he would hide behind movies, appearances, and endless work. But Keanu did something different. Instead of running away, he carried the grief with quiet dignity. He never tried to erase it, and he never let bitterness turn his heart cold. He chose to live in a way that honored her memory. Still, the loneliness was sharp. At night, when the city lights glowed across the skyline, he often sat by the window with a book or a record playing softly in the background. His friends worried about him. Some tried to cheer him up with laughter, others tried to distract him with new projects. But they did not understand that his sadness was not something to fix. It was part of who he had become. Then came a moment that changed his perspective. One evening, while walking home, he passed by a small bookstore. Inside, he saw a woman struggling to reach a book on a high shelf. Without thinking, he stepped inside and helped her. She smiled warmly and thanked him. It was such a small moment, ordinary and simple, but something about it touched him deeply. He realized that kindness had power. Even a small gesture could make someone's day brighter. He thought of Jennifer, of how she always cared for others, and he understood that living kindly was one way of keeping her spirit alive. From then on, he began to pay more attention to people around him. Strangers, workers, fans, anyone who crossed his path. He treated them with the same respect he once shared with her. But the world still tested him. As his career continued, fame brought more challenges. Rumors spread, stories were written without truth, and cameras followed his every move. Many stars responded with anger or pride, but Keanu remained calm. He did not want to waste his energy on hate. He had already lost so much, and he knew anger only deepened wounds. Instead, he answered with silence or a soft smile. There were days when people questioned him. Why was he so quiet? Why did he avoid the spotlight when others chased it? Why did he give away money instead of showing off wealth? They did not know his heart. They did not know the lessons grief had carved into his soul. He had learned that life was not about showing power, but about showing kindness. Still, even with his calm face, there were moments of breaking. Once, on the set of a film, he excused himself during a break and walked to a corner. He sat down, his head lowered, and tears fell. Nobody knew what memory had struck him, but the crew respected his silence. Later that day, he returned with a steady face, ready to work, ready to give his best. Resilience did not mean he never fell. It meant he always stood up again. Years passed, but Jennifer's presence never faded. Sometimes he dreamed of her. In those dreams, she was smiling, alive, speaking to him as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Waking up from those dreams was always the hardest. But instead of drowning in sorrow, he used those moments as fuel. He told himself that she would want him to live, to find peace, to spread kindness. His friends noticed the change. They saw how he listened more, how he never interrupted, how he made people feel safe in his presence. One of his closest friends once said, "Keanu has this calmness that feels rare. It is like he carries pain, but turns it into love." And so, while the world saw an actor, the people who met him saw something greater. They saw a man shaped by loss but strengthened by humility. They saw someone who respected every person, no matter who they were. And slowly, without him even trying, Keanu became a symbol of quiet resilience. But life still had more to test him with. He did not know it yet, but another twist was waiting. Something that would remind him again of the fine line between sorrow and hope, and push him deeper into the journey of kindness and healing. Keanu often believed that life was like a river. It kept flowing, carrying both joy and sorrow, never pausing for anyone. After Jennifer's loss, he had tried to let the river take him forward, but sometimes he felt as if he was caught in the current, unable to breathe. Still, he kept moving because he knew standing still would only deepen his pain. There came a time when he began to travel more, away from the familiar streets of Los Angeles. He wandered quietly through different cities, avoiding the spotlight when he could. In small towns, he found comfort in simplicity, a coffee shop with a kind barista, a bookstore where no one recognized him, a park where children played without caring who he was. These moments reminded him that life was not only about loss, it was also about connection, about the little things that made each day meaningful. During one of his travels, he met an old man in a quiet corner of a train station. The man was sitting alone, holding a faded photograph. Keanu sat beside him, and after a long silence, the man spoke. "She was my wife," he said softly, showing the photo. 40 years together, and then one morning, she was gone. His voice trembled, but his eyes held warmth. Grief does not end, he continued, but love does not end either. It changes shape, but it never leaves. Keanu listened, his heart heavy but also strangely comforted. He realized that grief was not only his burden. Millions of people carried it, each in their own way, and in that shared pain there was also a shared strength. The old man smiled before leaving, and Keanu whispered a "thank you." That brief meeting stayed with him for years. It reminded him that even strangers could guide your heart when you least expected it. As his career grew, he kept these lessons close. When people came to him with stories of their own pain, he listened with full attention. Fans often shared their struggles when they met him. They told him about losing parents, children, or partners. They trusted him because they felt his heart understood. Instead of rushing away, he gave them time, a handshake, a hug, or simple words of comfort. Sometimes that was enough to remind them they were not alone. But the world still threw shadows in his path. One evening during the filming of a movie, he received news that shook him again. A close friend he had known for years had passed suddenly. Once more, death stood at his door, whispering the reminder that nothing in life was permanent. Keanu sat alone that night, staring at the script in his hands, unable to read the words. He wondered why life seemed to take so much from him. But in that moment of sorrow, he made a quiet decision. He promised himself that he would not let loss turn him bitter. Instead, he would let it deepen his kindness. He would live in a way that gave back, that lifted others, because he knew how heavy the weight of sorrow could be. His actions began to reflect this vow. He donated quietly to hospitals, children's charities, and even funded cancer research, all without asking for recognition. He gave large sums of money to help people, but when asked, he never spoke about it. For him, it was not about fame. It was about making life lighter for someone else, even if only a little. Yet, even with his quiet generosity, he remained haunted by memory. At night, he sometimes found himself sitting by the window, whispering Jennifer's name into the air. He imagined what life would have been if things had gone differently. Would they have raised their child together? Would they have built a home full of laughter and warmth? Those questions had no answers, but they lingered like shadows in his heart. Then, during one late-night walk through the city, he stumbled upon a street musician playing a gentle melody on a violin. The sound was soft, full of longing, almost like a voice calling from the past. Keanu stood still, his eyes filling with tears. The music reminded him of Jennifer, of their dreams, of the life that had slipped away. Yet, instead of breaking him, the music wrapped around him like a reminder. Even in sorrow, beauty could still exist. He dropped some money into the musician's case, and when their eyes met, the musician nodded with gratitude. In that silent exchange, Keanu realized something profound. Pain would always live with him, but so would kindness, so would beauty. And if he could carry both together, then he could honor Jennifer's memory not by being trapped in grief, but by living with compassion for everyone he met. Still, the river of life was not finished with him. New storms were waiting, storms that would test the strength he had built, and force him to face his deepest fears once more. Keanu's life often looked calm from the outside, but inside his heart storms were always moving. He had learned how to smile gently in public, how to answer interviews with humility, and how to carry himself with quiet dignity. But when the lights went off and the world turned silent, his battles returned. Grief was not something that disappeared. It simply changed shape. On the set of one of his films, Keanu found himself surrounded by people, actors, directors, crew, all full of energy and chatter. But even in the middle of the crowd, he felt alone. There were moments when laughter filled the room, and yet, to him, it sounded far away. He missed the kind of laughter he once shared with Jennifer, a sound that could make him feel at home no matter where he was. Then came an unexpected twist. One afternoon, after filming had ended, a young crew member approached him. She looked nervous, as if unsure whether to speak. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "your movies helped me survive when I lost my mother. "Thank you." Her eyes filled with tears as she quickly walked away. Keanu stood frozen. He had not expected those words, but they cut through him like light breaking into darkness. In that moment, he realized something he had not fully understood before. His pain, his grief, his resilience. It was not only shaping him, it was reaching others too. The way he carried himself, the way he treated people, the honesty in his characters, it gave people hope. That night he thought about it for hours. Perhaps this was the reason life had kept him here, even when it felt unbearable. Maybe his story was not only his own. Maybe it was a path meant to touch others who were walking through their own storms. But fate was not done testing him. During those same months, rumors began spreading in magazines, painting him in ways that were not true. Lies about his relationships, his choices, even about his grief. Some mocked his sadness, saying he looked lonely in public photos. It hurt, not because he cared about fame, but because the world could be so quick to judge without knowing the weight someone carried. Instead of fighting back, he stayed silent. He remembered Jennifer's gentle nature, how she never wasted her energy on anger. He chose the same path. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. It was his way of showing the world that peace is louder than noise. Still, his heart carried questions. Was he truly living the way he was meant to? Was he honoring Jennifer's memory in the right way? Or was he simply hiding behind kindness, afraid to face the depth of his loneliness? These questions haunted him in the quiet hours, when there was no camera, no audience, only him and his thoughts. One evening, he decided to take a ride on his motorcycle, something he had always loved. The cool night air brushed against his face, and the roar of the engine drowned out his thoughts. Riding gave him freedom, a sense that he could escape the weight of everything for just a little while. But as he sped through the streets, he realized something important. No matter how far or how fast he went, memories always rode with him. And maybe that was not a curse. Maybe it was a reminder. When he stopped at a red light, a little boy on the sidewalk recognized him. Instead of asking for a picture, the boy simply waved. Keanu lifted his hand and waved back with a small smile. The boy's face lit up with joy, and Keanu felt a warmth spread in his chest. It was such a small thing, but it reminded him again. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, could matter more than he realized. The next day, he returned to the film set with a new sense of purpose. He worked harder, listened more, and encouraged the younger actors who doubted themselves. One of them later said, "He didn't act like a star. He acted like a friend." Those words meant more to him than any award, and yet, deep down, he knew the journey was not finished. There were still shadows inside him, still moments when sorrow tried to break through his calm surface. He had learned to carry pain, but he had not yet learned to forgive himself for the things he could not change. For the life he wished he could have given to Jennifer, for the family they never had. The river of his life was flowing toward another turning point, one that would challenge him again and force him to look deeper than ever before. As the years moved forward, Keanu's career continued to shine. New roles brought him back into the spotlight, and fans across the world admired his performances. But behind every success he carried the same quiet heart, the same wounds that never fully healed. While others celebrated fame loudly, he stayed humble. He never let success erase the lessons of loss. One evening, after a film premiere, he slipped away from the noise of cameras and crowds. While others gathered at the after-party, he chose a quiet walk through the city streets. The air was cool, and neon lights reflected on the wet pavement. He found himself stopping outside a small cafe. Through the window, he saw a young couple laughing together, sharing a piece of cake. Their joy was pure and unguarded, the kind of joy he once dreamed of having with Jennifer. His heart ached. He stood there for a long time, watching them. He was not jealous. Instead, he felt a deep longing, a reminder of everything he had lost. But at the same time, he whispered to himself, "I hope they never take this for granted." He knew how fragile life could be, how easily it could all disappear. Inside his mind, two voices always battled. One voice whispered sorrow. You will always be alone. The other whispered resilience. Your kindness is never wasted. Most days, the second voice was stronger, but some nights the first voice returned, pulling him into darkness. Then came a moment that tested him in a way he never expected. During the filming of a movie overseas, one of the crew members had a sudden accident on set. Chaos filled the air as people rushed to help. Keanu was one of the first to kneel beside the injured man, holding his hand and whispering, "Stay with us. Help is coming." His calm presence gave everyone strength until the medics arrived. Later, when people praised him for what he did, he only shook his head. Anyone would have done the same, he said softly. But those who saw the moment knew it was not ordinary. It showed the truth of who he was, a man who never ran away when someone needed him. That night, sitting in his hotel room, he thought about how quickly tragedy could strike. It reminded him again of Jennifer, of their baby, of everything he had lost. Yet instead of falling into despair, he chose to see it differently. He told himself that every moment in life was precious, and that he could not waste time hiding behind pain. From then on, he became even more intentional about how he lived. He greeted strangers kindly. He treated everyone on set, whether actor or worker, with equal respect, and he continued to give quietly to those in need. People began to notice his pattern. He did not only play heroes on screen. He tried to live like one off-screen too, though he never called himself that. Still, the world sometimes misunderstood him. Headlines would write about his solitude, calling him Sad Keanu when photos showed him sitting alone. People turned his grief into a meme, laughing without knowing the truth. When asked about it, he only smiled. Inside, it hurt, but he did not let it poison his spirit. Instead, he said, "Sometimes we all feel sad. Sometimes we all sit alone." Those simple words touched people deeply, because they were true. What many did not realize was that solitude was his way of listening, to himself, to the past, to the memory of Jennifer. In silence, he found clarity. In silence, he found strength. He did not see it as weakness. He saw it as survival, but fate was not done weaving new challenges. A letter arrived for him one day, written by a fan. It was not like the usual letters of admiration. This one was raw and heavy. The fan wrote about losing her brother, about how the grief had almost broken her. She wrote, "When I saw how you lived after your loss, it gave me hope that I could survive too. You showed me that life can still be lived with kindness, even when the heart is shattered." Keanu held the letter in his hands for a long time. He felt tears sting his eyes, but they were not only tears of sorrow. They were also tears of purpose. He realized that his pain, as cruel as it was, had become a bridge to others. His survival was not only his own, it was a guide for people who needed hope. Still, deep within, his heart wrestled with a question that never left him. Would he ever find peace for himself? He had given peace to others, but his own soul still carried shadows. He wondered if forgiveness, for life, for fate, for himself, was possible. The river of his life was carrying him toward another test, one that would ask him to face this question directly, to decide whether he could heal not just for others, but for himself too. Keanu had always known how to carry pain in silence, but silence does not always heal. Sometimes silence only hides what the heart cannot say. Years of grief had taught him resilience, but they had also left him with scars that no one else could see. When he was with others, he smiled gently, spoke softly, and offered kindness freely. But when he was alone, there were nights when he stared into the emptiness of his room and wondered if he would ever be free from the shadows of loss. One night, after a long day of filming, he sat at the edge of his bed in a hotel far from home. Outside the window, rain was falling against the glass, each drop echoing like a memory. He closed his eyes, and once again he saw Jennifer's face, her laughter, her warmth. But instead of comfort, the vision brought him guilt. He whispered into the quiet, "I'm sorry. I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have saved you. I wish I could have given you the life you deserved." The words broke something inside him. For years he had carried guilt like an unspoken burden. But then, in the stillness of the night, he remembered the words of the old man he had once met at the train station. "Love does not end," the man had said. "It changes shape." Keanu took a deep breath. Maybe Jennifer would not want him to live with guilt. Maybe she would want him to live with love. Maybe her memory was not a chain, but a light. The next morning, he walked to a nearby park. Children were playing, couples were walking hand in hand, and life moved with a rhythm that felt timeless. He sat on a bench and watched quietly. For the first time in years, instead of feeling crushed by what he had lost, he felt grateful for what he had once known. He had loved deeply, and even though it ended in tragedy, that love had shaped him. It had made him gentler, more human, more aware of the fragile beauty of life. Still, his journey of healing was not simple. A friend once told him, "You give so much to others, but do you ever give to yourself?" Those words stayed with him. He realized he had become so focused on lifting others that he often forgot his own heart needed care too. One day, while visiting a cancer foundation he supported, a young girl approached him. She was thin, fragile, but her eyes shone with courage. She handed him a drawing of a star. "This is for you," she said. "You are like a star. Even when you are sad, you shine for others." Keanu's heart trembled. He bent down, thanked her gently, and promised to keep the drawing safe. Later that night, holding the little piece of paper, he cried silently. Not only for the child, not only for Jennifer, but for all the brokenness of life. Yet in those tears there was also hope. His resilience began to take a new form. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about transforming pain into something greater. He realized that grief would never vanish, but it could become a source of light. He started to accept that his story was not about forgetting the past. It was about carrying it forward in a way that inspired others to live with kindness, no matter how heavy their own pain was. But even as he found new strength, life tested him again. Rumors returned, challenges appeared, and people sometimes misunderstood his silence. Yet this time he was different. He did not see these challenges as attacks. He saw them as reminders that the world could not take away his inner peace unless he allowed it. He began to find comfort in small joys, watching the sunrise, reading in quiet cafes, sharing time with friends who truly understood him. He no longer asked if he could erase the pain. Instead, he asked how he could live with it, how he could honor it, how he could let it guide him toward compassion. And then came an unexpected moment. While walking through Los Angeles one evening, he passed by a mural painted on the wall of a building. It showed two figures holding hands under the stars, surrounded by words that read, "Love lives forever." Keanu stopped in his tracks. He stood there for a long time, staring at the mural, his heart heavy but calm. For the first time in many years, he felt as if Jennifer was speaking to him through the world itself. He whispered softly, "I will never forget you, but I will keep living, and I will keep loving." This was not the end of his grief, but it was a turning point. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that healing was possible, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it as part of who he was. The years had taught Keanu many lessons, but the greatest one was this: pain and love are not enemies. They are threads woven into the same fabric of life. He no longer tried to push away his grief for Jennifer. Instead, he carried it gently like a fragile flame that reminded him of where he had been and what he had lost. But more than that, it reminded him of what it meant to truly live. People often asked him why he seemed different from other stars, why his kindness felt so genuine. He never explained, but the truth was simple. Once you have walked through darkness, you begin to see the world with different eyes. Every smile, every laugh, every small kindness becomes brighter because you know how quickly it can be taken away. One quiet afternoon, he was invited to speak at a small event. It was not a grand stage, not filled with flashing lights, but a gathering of people who had all known loss in their own lives. He stood before them, his voice steady but gentle. "I have lost people I loved deeply," he said, "and for a long time I thought that grief meant the end. But I learned that grief is also a form of love that never leaves. It hurts, yes, but it also teaches us to care more, to listen more, to be more human. If you carry pain, you are not weak. You are alive, and your love is still alive too. The room fell silent, many with tears in their eyes. His words were not polished like a speech. They were raw, honest, spoken from a heart that had lived what it said. That moment showed the world not only an actor, but a man whose resilience had become a message of hope. After the event, a woman approached him with a trembling voice. "I lost my husband 2 years ago," she said. "I thought I could never smile again. But today, hearing your words, I felt something change. Maybe it is possible to carry grief and still live." Keanu looked into her eyes and replied softly, "Yes, it is possible. You will never forget, but you will learn to live with love in a new way." She smiled through her tears. And in that simple exchange, two broken hearts shared strength. In his private life, Keanu still had quiet nights when he sat alone with his thoughts. He still dreamed of Jennifer, still imagined the family they might have built, still carried questions with no answers. But now, those dreams no longer crushed him. They reminded him that he had once known love that was real, and that love still lived in the way he treated others. The world continued to call him humble, kind, even mysterious. He never sought those titles. He only lived in the way he felt was right, quietly, respectfully, with kindness at the center. Every handshake, every gentle word, every silent act of giving was his way of honoring the memory of the woman he never forgot. He knew life would always be fragile, but he also knew that as long as he lived with compassion, Jennifer's spirit would never fade. Her moments with him lived forever, not only in his heart, but in the kindness he shared with the world. And so Keanu Reeves became more than an actor in the eyes of millions. He became a symbol of resilience, of humility, of respect, of kindness. His story reminded people everywhere that even when the heart is broken, love can still shine through, guiding us to live not only for ourselves, but for the memory of those we carry inside us. On one of his quiet walks through the city, he passed a garden filled with blooming flowers. He stopped, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "You are still with me." The wind blew gently against his face, and for a moment, he felt a peace he had long searched for. The river of his life was still flowing, but now he was not afraid of where it would carry him, because he knew that no matter where it went, love would always live forever.